Alrighty, welcome everybody. This is the distribution team demo on Thursday, August 4, 2022. Today will be a little bit different. We're just going to kind of run through an informal kind of tooling show and tell to kind of show what we do for workflows and things like that. I was just going to kick it off with kind of the workflow that I use when doing merge requests and some helpful tools that I use and things like that. A link to my .files is in the team notes. So I'll just kind of run through and show some things that help me work better. And then after that, would love to see what other people use on a daily basis too that make you more productive. Let's share my screen here. Alrighty, so I just made a quick bullet list here of things I was going to go through. So we'll split it up into the terminal and the browser. So starting with the terminal, maybe I'll do a little split screen here. Make this text a bit bigger. Try to find a better spot for my zoom bar. So whenever I get a new computer, I usually kind of clone these files down, and there's kind of a bootstrap script. Of course, that'll depend on what host machine you're running on, but a lot of this is configurable pretty flexibly because a lot of it just gets symlinked back into your home directory, and a lot of tools read configuration from the xdg configure variable path. So what I'll do here is I'll just kind of hop into Neovim to kind of show and walk through some of that configuration. So the first thing in my list here is Starship. It's just one of the shell prompts that's out there. There's a ton of these. This one's written in Rust. It's pretty quick. I know a lot of them tend to get kind of bogged down over time and start getting slow. But it's really configurable, and I like it because it plugs in with a lot of other tools like kubectl to kind of show what cluster you're on. I'm sure we've all been in a place where we ran a kubectl command and realized we were running against the wrong cluster. So easy to plug into things like that, and also show your git status, etc. So whatever's helpful for you can be configured here. There's tons of presets with really good documentation. So I like that to kind of give me context about what path I'm in and what branch I'm on, etc. Alrighty, next up, tmux. So I didn't use this at first, and then I think shortly after joining GitLab, I got more into it. It's really helpful for kind of managing multiple sessions. And so when I'm switching to maybe reviewing a different merge request, I can jump over with tmux to a different session and have a complete set of different splits and layouts and different paths on my machine. So I'll show you an example of that. So you can see down here, there's demo in brackets here at the bottom left. So that's the name of my session for tmux. And then each of these here are actually clickable too, but these are different panes, windows. So I can have here like a top and bottom split. I could add a split here with my key binding to the right or left, up and down, etc. And then I can switch between them like this. And then if I hit the key binding to list the sessions out, I can scroll through them here. So this is my demo session, but I also have a session for one of my MRs that I'm working on here. So you can see the path changed. I'm not doing anything just yet here, but you can see that I'm in the charts directory, or I could hop over to an operator directory I was working on earlier and see the git status, etc. And then hop back to my demo one. So super helpful to make sure that I kind of have logical separations between projects. The really nice part of using tmux too is that since it's a kind of a local server running on your computer, if I ever accidentally quit my terminal or if I reboot or anything like that, it saves that session, so I can always reattach to it later without losing my progress. That was something that happened before, especially if your terminal is kind of buggy and it crashes, you lose all your sessions and everything. Alrighty, next up in the list. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick note just for the recording. It saves remote terminals, but if the tmux terminal is local and you reboot, it's gone. If you've saved the set like a setup, it'll restore it, but like it won't bring back the files you had opened and all that kind of jazz.
That is true. I actually use a plugin for that. It's called tmux resurrect. And so it actually kind of saves a local text file that kind of lists out the paths and tools that are running. And so at any time I can hit the key binding to save that environment, or it'll automatically run at whatever interval. So whenever I reboot and start up, I just kind of restore that environment and everything comes back. Thanks for bringing that up. Next up, Git work trees. I think I've seen this mentioned in the channels a couple of times, but it was really helpful for when I was reviewing multiple merge requests. So I'll show an example of that here. Maybe I'll split out. So what I'm going to do is kind of just pull up like a merge request that I'm not reviewing. For example, let's grab, we'll just go to the charts here and grab one of the recent merge requests and get the branch name. Let's get one that's internal. Here's one from Jason. So I'll just hit B here to copy the branch name to my clipboard, and I will switch over to the charts. So here we are, you can see we're on master. So the way that I've set this up, I think there are a couple different ways you could approach this, but what I typically do when I set up a new project is that you'll see if I go back one directory here, I've got master as the main branch, but then each of the work trees gets checked out to a directory next to master. There's other ways to do this too. You can check out each branch under the master heading or just under like the GitLab project name heading. This is kind of what's worked well for me. I like it because it shows up nicely in my path, because the path will have the project name and the branch name. But effectively what I do is I have this alias for a work tree add. So let's do which GWA. So effectively it will, if the branch doesn't exist on the remote, it will check out a new branch, but if it does, it will just check out that branch locally and let me start working on it. So what I'll do first is just git fetch real quick to make sure I have it in master. Then I'll do GWA for git work tree add and then paste in that branch name. And now you can see my path changed. So we're on charts, GitLab 3443, yada, yada, yada. I can go into the log and show that this is showing Jason's latest changes. And so I could touch some new file here and do a git status. But then at any time I can just switch back to master. And now I'm back on that change. So makes it really easy to kind of separate different branches, especially when you've got like some config files or local notes that are really specific to that branch that you're testing and you don't want to pollute your directory. It's worked a lot better for me than stashing files and keeping track of those stashes and pops, et cetera. And so that's been really helpful. And then whenever you're done or the branch is merged, I just do which GWR. This was git work tree remove. So I get the, I basically go back to either master or main, whichever one it is, and then do git work tree remove. So that'll remove it from its list. You can see that list from master git work tree list. So it'll kind of show what branches are checked out and where and what commit they're at. So it will remove the work tree from the list and actually remove the directory from your machine too. Super handy.
Quick comment, since for myself, I can speak only for myself, but I'm using pretty much the same workflow, just with the slight tweaks. I'm thinking maybe we should just put it together into a script that we can put in under the distribution teams, group, so that everybody can benefit from this.
Yeah.
Like I created my own script without knowing that you were doing the same thing.
Yeah, we should probably reuse some of that. I know like a lot of these configs are so personal to what you use, but like just a reference document, I think that we could kind of pull from or fork would I think be really helpful.
We have an open issue for exactly that too, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, maybe you can link it in the demo notes. That might be a great way to action this meeting.
I will ask DJ and Jason, are you in favor of that at this time? Because at the previous time, we decided that we didn't want to do it because it was just so personal and kind of hard to maintain. So the maintenance burden would have been high. So now it's a discussion that we had about 2.25 years ago.
I don't believe we're talking about standardizing on this. I think we're just talking about, providing common tools that people can use. So at this point in time, it's more of a, like I saw that Mitch and I are using pretty much the same approach to our work style. And that means like we can just create a common piece of code. So it's not just me or Mitch who has to maintain it. And any person who wants to switch to that style would have a simpler time doing so. But I don't think we need to standardize on this as such.
Yeah, maybe we turn it more into documentation, and now for the charts, we have documented some tools that are helpful to use. So maybe in that same page, we can kind of put some helpful aliases or scripts that help with development, kind of like our development contribution guide. Maybe rather than a repository, it can just kind of be documentation that you can pull snippets from.
That thing about the directory where you could pull the snippets on, I'll bring it up later.
Cool.
It's an idea.
All righty, I want to make sure there's time for other folks to go through too, so I'll just kind of finish up here. So next one coming up is Neovim with LSP, language server protocol. So this helps me a lot for developing when I'm working on, for example, like the operator with Go. I can stay within Vim and because I have it configured and set up the way that works well for me, but I still get like some bigger IDE features. So for example, if I'm editing in here and I want to pull something from the OS package, I just type OS dot and I get a list here of all the methods, functions, variables associated with that package. And if I were to do like chmod here, it'll give me kind of a hint. So I want to help finish that method signature. And so it'll show that the name's a string. So I can do foo. And then next up is the mode, etc. So really helpful. This helps a lot. And then, for example, if I have some kind of error, this is an error. Obviously, this doesn't mean anything in Go. So now you can see on the left-hand side there's an E icon. And I can open a shortcut to kind of show that diagnostic. Or at any time, I can kind of pull up a list here with all the errors in the project. So if I'm up on the home line here and then click on that error, it'll pull me right to it. You can see what's wrong with it and fix it from there. Super handy. This works for, of course, any languages. I know this is basically what plugs into VS Code as well. The idea is that it's basically just running Go. I think you say Go, please, Go language server on the as a binary in your machine, and then Vim just hooks into that the same way VS Code would. So it works for YAML linting, Ruby, whatever you're writing. There's tons out there that kind of help you work with your relevant language. Real quick then too, Espanso has been really helpful for avoiding typing too much. And so what I really like about it is that you define your snippets in YAML and then it will replace them. So if I were to type a thing that I do a lot in reviews is that whenever I'm about to review it, I will type review with 2 W's. Some people put like a semicolon prefix beforehand, that kind of thing. But what I'll do is type review, and then it fills that out. So it'll put that label for workflow and review and assigning it as the reviewer. Or when I'm working on MR and taking it out of draft, I say ready. It takes it out of draft and puts it in ready for review, that kind of thing. For example, you can tell it where to put your cursor. So when I want to expand, have like the expandable HTML thing, I'll type details and it'll put my cursor in the summary and then I can fill out more details there. So I even started doing this like kind of with manifest too. I use this kind of manifest a lot in the operator when I'm testing. And so I just needed a snippet that I can kind of fill into a YAML file wherever I am. This should work across Mac OS, Linux, I think even Windows, but we don't have to worry about that here. And finally, for the terminal, I'm sure we've seen this before, but at K9S, this is a huge part of the workflow too. It's way faster than running a bunch of kubectl commands locally. Basically, anything you do with kubectl, you can do in here as well, a lot faster. And then I'll finish up with just a couple quick things in the browser. So something recent that I added was this kind of new tab page. I realized that there were a lot of just kind of helpful bookmarks that I was tired of typing out project names and stuff like that, but I also changed browsers from time to time, and I kept having to export and import my bookmarks and things like that. So this is actually just an HTML file I've committed to my dot files. And so I just have the browser set this as my new tab or new window page. And so now I can just kind of access things quickly wherever I am, no matter when I hop browsers, since it's just reading from a local file. And the final thing here is tree style tabs. I think I actually saw Dimitro using this, which is why I started with it. Maybe I can make this bigger. I guess that just makes the page bigger. But to me, it helps a lot contextually to see the relationship of tabs to each other. And so what's very helpful is being able to kind of see this in a collapsible tree structure. And this just helps a lot with context. So for example, if I'm reading this and then I see that we have this fork, I'll command click that and it opens it up in a new tab, but now it's nested under here and you can kind of see that relationship. So it helps me so much rather than just seeing a long flat list of tabs and understanding how they're related. I open them up like this, and this helps me kind of keep a map basically of how things are related. And then if I need to switch context, I can just collapse it and move on to something else. So that's been a huge help. I believe Firefox does this with a plugin. This browser is called Orion based on WebKit, and it has it built in. I don't think there's anything like it for Chrome without doing a really heavy extension, but those are a couple options if you like that kind of approach. Alrighty, that is it for my demo. Any questions before we move on to Jason? Cool. On to you, Jason.
Right, finishing up a comment for somebody on another project. Where did I put my window? There you are. I was just using a couple of these tools. However, I was using them against some customer stuff, so I can't show that as an example. The first one I actually want to call out is diff, D-Y-F-F. If anybody's ever tried to do diff on YAML, and it's a matter of somebody rearrange the lines, it's an absolute pain in the behind. The nice thing about diff, although using the syntax takes a little getting used to if you're a heavy user of diff, D-I-F-F, but one of the nice things is it will actually interpret the objects and then tell you the actual difference between whatever the rendered objects are, including added, removed, just a minor change, or say you took one item out of an array. You can get it to tell you that difference. This can actually be really handy if we're checking the merge outputs of a couple of things to ensure that the merge was properly a deep merge that was walked. Mitch, you've probably ran into this with the operator once in a while. You're just like, wait, what happened? And we had a weird oddity in how arrays were getting merged. We've really fixed that now. But you would end up with an array that had a map in it, but a property would move its position in the map after the merge by accident. You're like, oh, that's cute. Thanks to the nature of Golang and how it handles slices being non-deterministic intentionally. That was fun. YQ is very heavily used by myself and other members of the team. We even have it as some of our tooling within the projects. This is the Mike Farr variant, not the Python-based variant that builds on top of JQ itself. Summary is we're doing it because one, we needed to standardize on one, and two, this was much more portable than ensuring that we had Python and JQ and everybody matched and everybody was happy. So being self-contained as a Go binary, there. The syntax is very similar, but not identical, and it has some utility functions that JQ itself doesn't. One of the handy bits is you can actually get YQ to parse multiple documents and even split single documents out. So you can use YQ with Helm template or kube control get and take any of those contents, manipulate it however you need, and either even combine or run it through diff or anything else. There's a lot of interesting bits there. It's also not very tolerant of malformed YAML, which is kind of a good thing, because if you run Helm template through YQ and it somehow managed to output content but malformed, YQ will yell at you, which is kind of handy, but there's probably a linter for that that I should be using versus occasionally going, did I do that right? Another one that I use very regularly and we're starting to adopt throughout more of our tooling is Scopio. Scopio is part of the larger OCI container image handling. It's extremely useful for getting information, whether it's a remote or local repository, for inspecting manifests. And when I say manifests, I mean containers, but the listing of how a container is built is the manifest. And we can use Scopio to walk all kinds of information. I have a link there where somebody goes, we should have Scopio inspect, spit out whatever the image size is. Well, data's, yes, present, but it doesn't need built in because all you need is a tiny one-liner that does the same thing. You can also use it for silly things like mirroring, because it's actually got it built in once you understand what it does. We're using this behavior for the cloud native images mirror. Instead of actually having to do Docker and do dind, we can just run Scopio from anything that can reach the origin and the destination, and it will handle everything for us rather than to do Docker pull and then Docker tag and then Docker push, which actually improves that behavior. There's probably a few other tools, but these are the ones I managed to whip up while I was doing other things. Question or comments on that before I?
One comment.
I know I prattled pretty quick.
One comment on the diff, word of caution. It works on the multiple document files, the YAML files, but sometimes it's flaky. So it does help sometimes to break up the multi-document into individual documents when you're doing the diff. Not always, but on the larger documents, I've seen that happening, and you have to do that. Just a word of caution, more than anything.
Which YQ can handle for you.
Exactly.
Cool. Good list, Jason. By the way, Dimitri, your mic's pretty hot. I don't know if anybody else noticed that. I just wanted to jump in real quick too before we go to Dimitri's list. I skipped over fuzzy finding, which is probably one of the most helpful ones from the list. I'm just going to take a couple seconds to show that real quick. The main place that I use it was when browsing files in a project. So I usually don't do the tree view, which I can from here, but typically what's faster is you can kind of fuzzy find across all the files in the project. So you can kind of just start typing like adapter and it'll show a list of files here. And then say I wanted the operation, I could type RAT and it shows up at the top of the list and you can kind of see what letters are highlighted. It'll even show you like a preview of that file, and all you have to do to open it is enter. So that's super helpful. It's also helpful for browsing like local files in your system from the command line. So I can do which CDD. I have this mapped to basically find in my code directory and then pipe that out to ripgrep, which is using kind of fuzzy finding under the hood. Well, I'll say this differently. I use ripgrep to kind of list out the files in a directory and then pipe that to fuzzy finder. So FCF is just a binary on your machine, but you can pipe basically any output to it. And for each new line, it'll print out a line on your screen and then you can fuzzy find and hit enter to select it. And so I can kind of jump to any directory in my code directory just by kind of fuzzy finding and it lists them all out. And so I can jump right to like the OpenShift router like that. So it's way faster than like trying to walk around the tree with kind of tab complete, that kind of thing. So just wanted to show that as well. Alrighty, on to Dimitri's list.
Well, one is, let me try to share my screen and we'll see what happens. So I do like the official GitLab CLI. There is a fork that I've created, which functionality that I'm gonna quickly demo. CI there. So I can actually do this, and my Zoom bar is right in my way. There we go. Yeah. So I can actually run the pipeline on a specific branch and, you know, supply the files and repeat that. Not to mention I can do the CI get. CI get there. Oh, and by the way, demoing Control R in any shell. That's the best tool ever. Yeah, so you can just get the specific pipeline and extract the variables out of it. And while we're talking about this, do I want to do this? Probably not, because it's going to dump the kube config on the screen. But that's one way of extracting the variables from the previous run or repeating the previous run properly. And the other tool, the next one, is JLess. And JLess is a recent discovery of mine, which is, oh no, this is not working. JLess. It shows you the, let's see if I can do, oh, wait, Let's try this. There. So you can navigate through things quite easily, fold pieces, and it's like, well, it's less, but for the JSON, so much easier to kind of operate, and you can look for tags and things like that, repo. And there are quite a few additional functions inside, so highly likable from my end. And there is the bat, which is the replacement for cat, which basically will show you, let's look for something a little bit safer. Bat. Nope. Looks like I was always doing something like, anyway, once you try it, basically it's the syntax highlighted cat. Much easier to on the eyes and much easier to navigate the stuff that you want to work with. And the next thing is the VS Code GitLab extension. And this one is like, I've been using more and more of it recently, because what you can do, you can actually go and check all of your merge requests, and you can actually take a look at what was going on within that request right within the VS Code, which is much simpler than navigating it in the browser and things like that. So you can get your diffs in there, and you can kind of see for yourself what's going on and interact with your own merge requests on the different level altogether. And Firefox bookmarks and keywords. This is the one that I do like a lot, because variables, and you can see when I type GitLab and variables, I'm trying to start to type that, it pops up this one, and that's the bookmark that has two keywords, GitLab and variables. So it's a lot more convenient to find specific things. So when you have, or for example, there's another one, GitLab CLI variables. So I do use that a lot. Just it takes a little bit of practice to kind of organize your bookmarks appropriately. But once you do that, it's much easier to find stuff in your bookmarks. And something that I'm not going to demo or anything, but Podman and Builda, I've been using them a lot lately just to sidestep some of the Docker related things, as in like running Docker and Docker and things like that. Podman is a lot easier in that regard. So this is it. That's a really quick rundown.
Good stuff. Thanks for the list, Dimitro. I see we're at time, but anybody who has to drop, feel free. I see Robert added some items too, so anybody who's available to stay, we can see Robert's list.
Go ahead and share my screen here. So we'll start off with, I have done some work to make it easier for me to find things. So one of the things that I find is that in some Linux distros, you have colorized man pages. So I have added that. This makes it a lot easier to see bolds, color, and search through. Also, you can probably tell like my terminal is set up for color and iconography. That helps me find things faster when I'm in here. This is through a patch called LSD. I maintain all of this stuff through Ansible, and the job can target Fedora, current Debian, macOS, and FreeBSD. So it installs the same equivalent tool set across all the distros that I touch. And so it lets me get all kinds of stuff. Jason noticed, but ASDF, it does that. Find it. I also use Tmux. So find it. Let's talk about Git first. So one of the things that comes up a lot is like trying to find what header you on, what tags do you have. So Git has a lot of interesting features that you can put in. This is my colorized and shows me like the actual merge flows. So when I'm looking at a branch or tree, I can see everything, including tags, what was released and when. Other things that I can do, let me just not do this. I don't want to waste CI minutes, but so things like I want to push a build. I can push an omnibus build. I can push a FIPS build, a community edition build. I can test build images. I can do UBI builds. All this stuff is just macros. If you want to find the oldest ancestor of your current thing and you want to figure out these two branches, where do they go? So this is just a macro for that. I don't use this here because we don't use paste bins, but Fedora CentOS upstreams both use paste bins. I can just send a paste bin directly from a diff. So if I want to share something and get help, I can do that immediately. Because then I use a lot of this stuff just to make my Git experience a little faster. I also have my credential helper here, which changes up based on your distro, but that lets you not have to type your password every time you clone, check out, change over, whatever. You can put it on your keychain. Let's see, what else do I use? What did I write down? That's streamlining Git. Local multi. So I do a lot of omnibus testing. So I have a vagrant file that runs, and I haven't automated this first part, but I can pick my distro and it stands up a network. Now, if I want to configure it, I have gitlab.test. This is a very simple one, but let's just say, which one do I want to look at? I'll say external Redis, right? So one of the things in here is that every single item, I just give it the name of the node and .sh. I can run whatever scripts I want in the post install. So if you're trying to test something and you want to go back to green, this can do anywhere from just single omnibus. I have configurations up to like multi-nodes. So this is actually my first iteration of installing like HA. So I can install HA clusters here local. And all this just uses Vagrant and VirtualBox. On my Fedora setup, it's using libvirt. So, and yeah, so that's kind of like my automate. That's how I test things pretty quickly. I have standard test scenarios for like standard components, like all of our dep mods. So like when we update Mattermost, when we update various components, I can stand that up and look at it immediately. With automated testing behind it. And trying to think if there's anything else that I put in here. I keep shell macros. For those who don't know about Balus, there's a if you put a job number after that, let me see here. Oh, macros. Let me stop my screen share for a second and make sure that I don't have it. I think I just have it as a, yes, I just have that as something safe. All right. So this is Balu's macro that's been shared around the team for a while. Those of you may not have seen it yet. If you have a job and you want to download the package that was built, this little macro grabs that package. It'll be in whatever I think right now is Ubuntu 20.04. And that, so if you do a job and you do the QA pipeline test and you want to look at the package it built, this is a macro Balu wrote that just downloads it. So this is a thing that I've had, I think, since like the first week I was here. I do almost everything through shell macros or just basic shell. I don't do, I keep it simple because then my shells translate. I don't have to worry about installing language runtimes. Yeah, that's all I've got. Fairly straightforward. So, any questions? We're on to the next person.
The additional comment on that one is it's definitely one of those things where the more familiar you get with how everything actually operates, since 90% of what we output is directly interacting with the CLI in some way, it's not surprising that a lot of us literally live in the CLI at some point. I do regularly make use of code, but most of the time I only open code when I need to edit like 5 or 6 files at a time. But most of the time, as anybody who's paired with me, I'm in and out of Vim so fast, it's not even funny. And a lot of our projects, most people won't be able to do this, but my brain keeps a full logical organization of all the projects and the work trees. So I don't necessarily need to navigate, but that having FSF would probably be handy in some degrees for what I'm doing. So it's that workflow. If I can figure out how to integrate it into mine, it might be helpful when I'm touching something I haven't touched in a while. It's one of those things when you've been on the project long enough, your brain just kind of memorizes the structure.
You know,
Um,
Jason, you just reminded me of something else I wanted to share. In Vim, you can, that diff we talked about, you also have other options. Not for diff, but like, let's just say you're trying to find out something more. If you haven't seen it, Tim Pope, who's a massive Rubyist, has all kinds of options. So if you wanted to look at history, you can cross through and load these in. So if you want to go look at different diff, you can go around. And it's just another window in Vim. So there are a plethora of things in Vim. Yeah, I don't even know how many are in here, but I create color stuff. So that's all that. But there are also dozens of Ruby and T-Pope stuff to make your Ruby stuff easier. So for folks who are working in like Omnibus all the time, it's just T-Pope's GitHub profile has tons of things. Also Jinja and JSON. So just want to point that out. Because if you're trying to deal with it, it's a lot easier if you have helpers.
The one thing that we did not cover is some of the things that I talk about with my maintainer trainees, which is actually mailbox organization. One of the things that we do is walk through how to organize incoming MRs and issues and labeling those and being able to keep track of things. Like I've been asked, how are you so on top of issues? Because my Gmail tells me exactly where everything is and if it matters to me or not. That's an extensive kind of workflow item rather than work tool item. So maybe we'll cover that one another day. It may have, by nature of demonstration, requires showing you a mailbox. It may have to be an internal recording. Okay. Stating the other common and obvious is that this team loves ASDF, and we are very happy to see other teams taking it up because it's super handy, to say the very least. If you're not familiar with the inner workings of ASDF, I do strongly recommend it. It is relatively cross-platform. Obviously, it depends on what the tools are, because some tools aren't built for Mac OS, and you may have a bad day for some things. But you can make use of a tool versions file, which can be checked in, by the way, so that your expected work environment is actually the same across many machines and multiple clients. And then you can actually just run ASDF install. It will read the tool versions file and make sure that you have the copy of all the things, so that when you're actually operating on that repository, everybody's on the same page in terms of tooling and versions.
One more popped into my mind before we shut out here. A thing that we do a lot of the time is grabbing text from the terminal, and it helps a lot to be able to keep your hands on the keyboard to do that. So in Tmux, there's a plugin called Extracto. And so what I can do is hit the prefix and then tab, and it kind of fuzzy finds all the entries on your screen. And so if I wanted to, like, I just installed Codium per Dimitro's recommendation of that plugin. So I could type some of that and grab the path where it put it and just hit enter. Now it's on my clipboard to paste. So this is hugely helpful. Like whenever I do a git push and it tells me what that new commit is, I just grab that commit hash and paste it into the browser. If I'm on that kind of window, or if I'm grabbing a path from somewhere, it's super helpful. So any Tmux users, that's a super helpful way, instead of like taking your mouse and clicking and dragging. I know Tmux has one built in too, where you can kind of go back up and select things as well. But if you know specifically what you want to go grab, it's usually way quicker to kind of use that fuzzy finding capability there too.
I went ahead and added that to your Tmux list of plugins up top.
Cool. Yeah, it's all in the dot files too, so you can kind of browse around and see the the config files. And so all the tmux plugins are listed in the tmux config file. And then good stuff. Any other questions or handy tips and tools?
Sure, if I had
Alrighty.
more time available, I'd probably come up with more.
Yeah, well, we should do this again. Maybe we can do it once a month or something, just kind of keep up to date. I know it helps a lot with daily productivity, and the smoother our days go, the more we can get done and the easier work is. So you can make it more of a habit.
Suggestion on that is maybe instead of the tools, we go with like cookbooks and quick recipes for some of the things. Like, how do I determine what this customer actually set on all of their YAML settings?
Yeah.
We get support questions. Here's this customer's config. Customer's config is all 5,000 lines. You're just like, there's no way they have 5,000 lines of config. Oh, there's the header from the notice that they didn't read. Okay. Trying to pull that out from whatever the default version is from the version that they had installed. That's an example of like, what's the workflow to do that?
Yeah, maybe we need some distribution run books.
Maybe so.
Cool.
I do feel like we need to go for common tips and tricks and or like scripts and setup and everything else so that people can leverage that, not necessarily have to use it.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think there's an issue that Jason Young linked below, so maybe we can kind of follow up there and come up with some deliverables that we can make this more consumable. All righty. Thanks everybody for a great session. Enjoy the rest of your day.